I had always tried to be the perfect son-in-law, the kind who blends seamlessly into the family, who laughs at the right moments and never stirs the pot. But my mother-in-law had never seen me that way. From the first day I married her daughter, I felt the subtle coldness, the sideways glances, the unspoken judgment that made every family gathering a test of patience. For months, I tried to ignore it, believing that maybe she just needed time to accept me. But deep down, I knew this was more than disapproval. It was rejection. That Saturday, the tension reached a breaking point. We had come for the usual family dinner, and my mother-in-law's words cut sharper than ever. "You're not family," she said, her voice carrying a cruel certainty that made everyone in the room shift uncomfortably. It wasn't a critique or a teasing remark. It was a declaration, an invisible barrier drawn between me and the people I loved most. My wife looked down at her plate, silent, avoiding my eyes. My heart sank, but something inside me snapped. I couldn't let her words define my worth any longer. I spent the night in quiet contemplation. Every insult, every smirk, every dismissive gesture replayed in my mind like a cruel montage. For years, I had tried to fit into a mold that would never accept me, and for years, I had held back my true self, my ambitions, my voice, just to avoid confrontation. But that night, I realized something important. Acceptance from her wasn't necessary for my happiness. I had built a life, a marriage, and a future that was mine, and no amount of bitterness from someone else could take that away. By morning, I had made my decision. I would leave not in anger, not in silence, but with intention. I packed my bags, not with resentment, but with clarity. Among the items, I included something she had always underestimated: the documents to a small investment account I had quietly maintained over the years, one that represented my independence, my foresight, my ability to provide and protect my family. I had always kept it a secret, fearing that she would belittle my efforts, but now it became my symbol of liberation. When my wife awoke, I gently explained my plan. Her eyes widened, a mix of relief and apprehension, as she realized that I wasn't leaving her, but I was leaving the toxicity behind. "I can't let her define me," I told her, my voice steady but firm. "We have our life, and it's time we claim it fully." She nodded, tears in her eyes, understanding that this wasn't rebellion, it was self-respect. As we walked out together, bags in hand and resolve in our hearts, I felt a strange lightness. The weight of years of silent tolerance lifted with every step. I knew there would be fallout, arguments, and perhaps a lifelong tension with my mother-in-law, but it no longer scared me. I had finally realized that the only opinion that truly mattered was my own, and the life I built with the woman I loved. The first few days after leaving my mother-in-law's house felt surreal. It was as if a heavy fog had lifted, and for the first time in years, I could breathe without holding back. My wife and I moved into a small, modest apartment we had been saving for, one that symbolized a fresh start. It wasn't luxurious, but it was ours, and that was more valuable than any approval I had been chasing. At night, when the city lights flickered outside our window, I reflected on how much of my life I had spent bending, adjusting, and censoring myself just to avoid conflict. Every decision had been filtered through the lens of her judgment, every word weighed against an invisible standard. And now, free from that constant scrutiny, I could feel a part of me I had long forgotten, the part that laughed without caution, dreamed without fear, and loved without hesitation. But freedom came with unexpected challenges. My mother-in-law didn't take my departure quietly. The phone rang incessantly, messages piled up, and passive-aggressive texts filled my inbox. Each note tried to guilt me, to convince me I had done something wrong. At first, I felt a pang of doubt, a whisper in my mind that maybe I had been too hasty. But when I looked at my wife, her hand in mine, I realized that doubt was nothing more than the residue of years of manipulation. Her support grounded me, reminding me that we were in this together. One evening, she confessed her own fears. "I've felt torn between you and my family for so long," she said, her voice shaking. "I didn't know if I could stand up to them, but I can't imagine going back to that life." I held her close, silently promising that we would face the world as a team, no matter the opposition. That moment solidified something crucial. Our bond was stronger than any external approval. As days turned into weeks, I began focusing on rebuilding parts of my life I had neglected. I revisited old hobbies, reconnected with friends I had distanced myself from, and even started working on a side project I had shelved years ago because it wasn't practical. For the first time, I was making choices that reflected who I truly was, not who someone else wanted me to be. But despite this newfound clarity, the tension with my mother-in-law lingered. I knew this wouldn't end overnight. She would try to reclaim control, to assert her dominance, and to make me feel small again. Yet, for the first time, I felt equipped to face it. The power she once held over me had diminished, replaced by a confidence that came from knowing my own worth and the unshakable love of my wife. And as I lay awake one night, listening to her breathing beside me, I realized that leaving had been more than an escape. It had been a necessary step toward reclaiming my life, my voice, and my dignity. The path ahead would be challenging, but I finally understood that some battles weren't about winning approval, they were about finding peace. By the third week, the initial relief of leaving my mother-in-law's house had settled into something deeper, a sense of ownership over my own life. Yet freedom came with its own kind of anxiety. Every time my phone buzzed, I braced myself, expecting another passive-aggressive message or a guilt-laden call. And often, that's exactly what I got. One afternoon, I opened my inbox to find a long, meticulously written email from her. She accused me of selfishness, of abandoning the family, of breaking hearts that never wanted to be broken. I could feel the old pang of guilt rising in my chest, the one that had haunted me for years whenever I dared to assert myself. But then I took a deep breath and reminded myself, their expectations had never been fair. My life wasn't meant to be a mirror of their desires. Around the same time, I began noticing subtle changes in my wife. She seemed lighter, more open, and surprisingly brave. One evening, she suggested we take a weekend trip to a small town we had always talked about visiting, but never did, because family obligations always came first. As we drove through winding roads and past autumn-colored trees, I watched her laugh freely, a sound that had been muffled under the weight of her own familial pressures. It was a reminder that leaving wasn't just liberating me, it was liberating her too. But the shadow of my mother-in-law wasn't completely gone. One night, she appeared at our apartment unannounced. I remember the chill that ran down my spine as she knocked on the door, her eyes sharp and accusing. My wife stood beside me, calm but tense, and I realized that, for the first time, we were facing her together as a united front. She demanded to know why I had forced this separation and insisted that I bring my wife back to her home. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I looked her in the eye and said, "We're not coming back. We're building our life here together, and nothing you say can change that." Her face twisted in anger, disbelief, and, perhaps, an unfamiliar sense of powerlessness. She left after an hour of futile arguing, slamming the door behind her. For the first time, I realized something profound. The control she had wielded for so long was gone. My life was no longer subject to her whims. That night, after she left, my wife and I sat on the couch, holding each other silently. We didn't need words. The look in her eyes said everything. We had weathered the storm of judgment, manipulation, and fear together. And in doing so, we had discovered something that had been buried under years of obligation, a resilient, unshakable connection that no one could take away. In the days that followed, I began to rebuild not just my life, but my sense of identity. I signed up for a class I had always wanted to try, started journaling my thoughts, and even reconnected with friends who had drifted away during the years I spent living under someone else's rules. It felt as though I was rediscovering parts of myself I had long forgotten, and each small step reminded me that the life I deserved was waiting, just beyond the reach of my past constraints. Leaving had been terrifying, but now, 3 weeks in, I realized it was the best decision I had ever made. And the journey, though far from over, felt like mine for the first time in years. By the 4th week after leaving my mother-in-law's house, I began to feel a sense of liberation I hadn't experienced in years. The apartment felt alive, not just a place to sleep, but a home we could shape together, free from constant scrutiny and judgment. For the first time, I noticed little things I had ignored before: the warmth of sunlight through the window, the sound of birds in the morning, even the faint hum of life in the neighborhood. It was as if the world was quietly celebrating our freedom with us. One evening, while cooking dinner together, my wife paused mid-task and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen in a long time: softness, vulnerability, and trust. "I didn't realize how heavy her presence was on us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. My chest tightened, because I finally understood how much her mother's influence had affected both of us. I reached for her hand and held it firmly. "We're free now," I told her. "We get to decide our own life." That night, we talked for hours, sharing fears, frustrations, and regrets we had both kept buried. We laughed, we cried, and for the first time, it felt like we were truly partners, facing life as equals. The judgment, manipulation, and pressure of her mother's presence were gone, replaced by trust and genuine connection. However, freedom didn't mean life was without challenges. My mother-in-law's influence lingered like a shadow. Subtle messages and rumors began circulating through friends and acquaintances, reminders that she still had reach. "She's just worried," people would say. But I knew it was control disguised as concern. We had to remain vigilant, not only physically, but emotionally, to ensure we weren't pulled back into her web. Then came the real test. One evening, she called my wife, insisting on a private conversation. Her tone was demanding, almost threatening. My wife hesitated, instinctively wanting to comply, but I gently stopped her. "Not this time," I said. "We set the rules now." That moment felt like a turning point. We were no longer passive, no longer bound by her manipulation. In the following days, we began establishing routines to strengthen our independence. We cooked together, walked in the park, and even started planning a weekend trip. Every small act reinforced our autonomy and reminded us that our lives belonged to us. By the end of the 4th week, I realized that leaving had done more than free us from her control. It had allowed us to reclaim our lives, redefine our relationship, and find strength we didn't know we had. Fear and tension still existed, but they were tempered with resilience, love, and hope. For the first time in years, I could breathe deeply, knowing that we were building a life solely on our terms. We were finally in control of our story. By the 5th week, the sense of independence we were building began to feel solid. Yet there were moments when the past threatened to creep back in. One Saturday afternoon, I received a message from my mother-in-law. It wasn't aggressive, not at first glance, but it carried the weight of subtle manipulation I knew all too well. She asked if we could meet for coffee and talk things over. My stomach tightened. I knew she was trying to worm her way back into our lives, to unsettle the balance we had fought so hard to achieve. I showed the message to my wife. Her hands trembled slightly as she read it, a mixture of fear and anger passing across her face. We sat in silence for a moment, understanding that this was another test, not just of our patience, but of our unity. "We don't owe her anything," I said finally. "Not anymore. We've worked too hard to let her take that from us." My wife nodded, but the hesitation in her eyes revealed just how deep her mother's influence had been. That evening, we made a plan. We wouldn't engage with her attempts to manipulate us, at least not directly. Instead, we focused on building our own rituals and routines that emphasized trust, communication, and shared joy. We cooked meals together, laughing over burnt edges and mishaps. We started a small project to decorate the apartment, painting walls in colors we actually liked, not what her mother would have approved. Each stroke of the brush felt like reclaiming a part of ourselves, but freedom isn't without its ghosts. One night, I woke to hear my wife sobbing quietly in the bedroom. I sat beside her, feeling a mix of helplessness and determination. She whispered, "I didn't know it would hurt this much to finally stand up to her." I held her close, telling her that pain is part of healing, part of reclaiming one's power. "You're not alone," I reminded her. "We're in this together." A breakthrough came when we decided to host our first dinner with friends in the apartment. Friends who knew pieces of the story, but not the full extent of the control and manipulation we had endured. As we laughed, shared stories, and enjoyed the evening, I realized how much the isolation my mother-in-law had imposed on us had shaped our lives. We were finally stepping out into the world on our own terms. Then came an unexpected moment of clarity. My wife, in her quiet way, said, "I never want to feel that powerless again." I smiled at her, feeling pride and admiration. We had transformed fear into courage, doubt into determination. It wasn't just about standing up to her mother. It was about standing up for ourselves, for our marriage, for our dignity. By the end of the 5th week, we weren't just surviving, we were thriving. And though the past still lingered like a shadow in corners of our mind, we knew we had the strength, unity, and clarity to face whatever came next. By the 6th week, our sense of independence had grown stronger, but with strength came new challenges. One evening, as we were tidying up after dinner, there was a knock on the door. My heart skipped a beat. It was her, my mother-in-law, standing there with a forced smile and a bouquet of flowers that felt more like a trap than a gift. She claimed she wanted to make amends and asked if she could come in. I exchanged a glance with my wife, seeing the mix of fear, anger, and determination in her eyes. We let her in, but carefully. Every movement, every word was cautious. She tried to start small talk, complimenting the apartment, asking about our routines, pretending to care. But beneath her polite tone, I could feel the old pattern, the subtle manipulation, the guilt trips that had once dictated our every decision. My wife's jaw tightened, and I could see her bracing herself, ready to stand her ground. Then she tried it, the classic guilt approach. "I just want to be part of your life. I feel so excluded," she said softly. I watched my wife inhale deeply, steadying herself. "You've had your chance to be part of our life," she replied, her voice firm but calm. "We've chosen to live without the toxicity. We're happy, and we're finally free." I felt a surge of pride. She had found her voice, and I could see the empowerment glowing in her eyes. Her smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of frustration. She tried another tactic, bringing up the past, highlighting moments when she claimed we had disrespected her. But my wife and I didn't flinch. We shared subtle glances, silently communicating our boundaries. I realized how much courage it took for her to confront this without crumbling, without letting years of manipulation dictate her emotions. Eventually, she left angrily, but defeated. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. We locked the door behind her and exhaled, feeling the tension slowly dissipate. That night, we sat on the couch, holding hands, and talked about how far we had come. "We're really doing this," my wife whispered. "We're finally free from her control." But freedom, I knew, would not be handed to us easily. There would be more tests, more attempts to unsettle the balance we had fought so hard to achieve. Yet, for the first time, I felt an unshakable sense of partnership. We were facing the storm together, not as individuals fighting for survival, but as a united front, stronger and more determined than ever. That night, sleep came easier. For the first time in weeks, there was a sense of calm, fragile, yes, but real. And as I drifted off, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we were ready. Not because we weren't scared, but because we had each other, and that made all the difference. By the 7th week, the tension had shifted from occasional confrontations to a constant underlying presence. Even though my mother-in-law hadn't returned since that last visit, her shadow seemed to linger over our home. Every phone call, every unexpected knock made us flinch. It was exhausting, but it also strengthened our resolve. One Friday evening, my wife received a text from her mother. "We need to talk. This isn't over." My stomach dropped. I could see the familiar flicker of anxiety in my wife's eyes, but it was tempered with determination. She looked at me and said, "I'm not going back to being under her control. Not ever again." We agreed to meet in a neutral place, a quiet cafe, halfway between her mother's house and ours. Walking in, I could feel the tension radiating from both sides. My mother-in-law was there, with a carefully composed smile that barely masked the simmering frustration. She tried to assert dominance immediately, speaking over my wife, cutting in with judgment disguised as advice. But this time, my wife didn't flinch. She held her head high, her voice clear and unwavering. "I am not the same person you tried to control," she said. "I have my own life, my own decisions, and I am happy. You will not manipulate me again." I felt an overwhelming surge of pride and relief. Her words, her confidence, were like a shield protecting both of us. Her mother attempted one final tactic, a subtle guilt trip, mentioning family obligations, loyalty, and past sacrifices she had supposedly made for us. But we stayed united, unshaken. I added my voice firmly. "We are not obligated to live under your rules. Our happiness isn't negotiable." The cafe felt smaller with her rising frustration, but we didn't back down. By the end of the conversation, she left abruptly, slamming the door behind her. My wife exhaled, and I put my arm around her. "We did it," I whispered. "We didn't give her power today." She leaned into me, smiling faintly, tired but resolute. "It's not over," she said, "but I finally feel like I'm standing on my own." That night, back at home, we talked late into the evening about boundaries, trust, and the importance of supporting each other. We realized that the road ahead would not be without challenges, but the foundation we were building of mutual respect, love, and unwavering unity was stronger than any outside influence. For the first time in years, we felt that sense of true autonomy. The battle wasn't about winning against her. It was about reclaiming our lives. And in that realization, there was peace, fragile, yes, but real. And for the first time, we could truly imagine a future unburdened by her control. The days following that tense cafe meeting were deceptively calm. It felt like a brief truce had been called, but deep down, I knew it was only temporary. My mother-in-law was not someone to back down quietly, and we could sense her plotting from afar. Every little message, every missed call, felt like a potential minefield. One afternoon, I came home early from work, expecting the usual quiet. Instead, I found my wife pacing the living room, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Her expression was a mix of fear and disbelief. "She showed up at my office today," she whispered, her voice trembling. She tried to speak to me, to convince me that I'm making a mistake. I refused, but she was persistent, and she knows exactly how to push my buttons. My stomach sank. I knew then that the real battle wasn't just about our home or our boundaries. It was about our peace of mind. Her mother's interference had now reached into our professional lives, threatening to disturb the very foundation we were trying to rebuild. I pulled my wife close, holding her tightly, trying to convey through touch what words alone couldn't. "We'll face this together," I said. "No matter what she does, we stay united. That's how she loses power over us." That evening, we sat down to make a plan. We couldn't avoid her entirely, but we could control how we responded. We decided to document everything, texts, calls, and any attempt at manipulation. It was exhausting, tedious, and emotionally draining, but necessary. Each entry was a small victory, a tangible reminder that we were taking back control. Later that night, I found my wife sitting quietly by the window, staring at the city lights. Her face was illuminated softly, but the shadow of stress lingered in her eyes. I sat beside her and took her hand. "Do you remember how scared you felt when this all started?" I asked. She nodded. "Look at you now," I continued. "Stronger, smarter, and unshakable. You've come so far, and I'm proud of you." She smiled faintly, but tears welled in her eyes. I hate that she makes me feel like I'm constantly on edge," she admitted. "But I can't let her win, not anymore." I kissed her forehead gently. "Then she won't. We decide our life, not her. We write the rules now." That night, as we lay in bed, a quiet determination settled between us. We were no longer reacting out of fear or guilt. We were strategizing with intention. Her mother could try all she wanted, but she had underestimated the bond we had. And this realization, this newfound unity, was more powerful than anything she could throw at us. The storm wasn't over, but for the first time, I felt we were ready for whatever came next. We were prepared to defend our life, our love, and our peace, no matter the cost. The tension reached its peak a few days later. I was at work when my wife called, her voice tight with urgency. "She's here," she whispered. "She's standing outside our building, refusing to leave. And she's yelling at anyone who tries to approach her." My heart pounded. I rushed home, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. When I arrived, I saw her mother through the glass doors, her face twisted in fury, her hands gesturing wildly as she demanded to see us. My wife was standing calmly by the door, her posture firm, her expression resolute. I realized then how much she had grown. She was no longer the person cowering in fear. She had become someone who could face confrontation without losing herself. I approached, keeping my voice steady. "Ma'am, this is private property. You need to leave." Her mother's eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, my wife added, "We're not afraid of you anymore. We've set boundaries, and they will be respected." There was a brief pause, a silent standoff where it felt like time itself had stopped. Then, slowly, her mother backed away, muttering threats under her breath. But for the first time, I felt no fear, only a deep, unwavering confidence in the strength we had built together. That night, we sat together, reviewing everything that had happened. I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, but also a quiet triumph. "We did it," I said softly. "We faced her, and we didn't break." She leaned into me, tears slipping freely now, a mixture of relief and catharsis. "I never thought I'd feel this strong again," she admitted. Over the following days, life began to settle. Her mother's attempts to interfere diminished, and slowly the peace we had been craving returned. We celebrated small victories, a quiet dinner without tension, an uninterrupted weekend morning, the simple joy of feeling safe in our own home. Each moment was a reminder of the resilience we had discovered within ourselves. I realized that this struggle, painful as it had also been a gift. It had tested our limits, revealed our strengths, and solidified the bond between us. We were no longer victims of someone else's bitterness. We were architects of our own life. As I watched my wife laugh that evening, free from the shadow of fear, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. We had endured, survived, and emerged stronger. And while her mother's presence might never completely vanish, it no longer held the power to define us. For the first time in months, I truly believed we could face anything together. And that realization, that unshakable unity, was worth every battle, every tear, and every moment of fear we had endured. The morning sun streamed through our windows, casting a warm glow across the room. I watched my wife move about our apartment, preparing breakfast, and for the first time in months, the air felt light, free of tension, free of fear. The battles we had faced, the confrontations, the anxiety, all seemed distant now, almost like a shadow that had finally lifted. We sat down together, sharing coffee and quiet conversation. There was no trace of bitterness, no lingering resentment, only a profound sense of relief and triumph. "We made it," I whispered, reaching for her hand. She squeezed it gently, her eyes reflecting the same mix of exhaustion and joy that I felt. "Yes, we did," she replied. In the days that followed, life began to bloom anew. Her mother's visits dwindled, and eventually she stopped trying to control or intimidate us. We reclaimed our home, our peace, and our space. Every small moment became precious. Laughter in the kitchen, late-night talks on the balcony, and the comfort of knowing we had each other's unwavering support. I realized that the struggle had changed us. It had revealed our inner strength and the depth of our resilience. What had once seemed unbearable, the constant tension, the manipulations, the fear, was now a testament to what we had overcome. I felt proud, not just for myself, but for my wife, for her courage, and for the unbreakable bond we had forged through adversity. That evening, we sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city lights flicker outside. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and I held her close. "We've come so far," she said softly. "I never imagined we could feel this free, this alive." I kissed her forehead, feeling the truth of her words resonate deeply. We had survived the storm, and in surviving, we had found ourselves stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. The past no longer held power over us. The fear, the anger, the pain, they were all behind us, transformed into lessons and resilience. And as we looked forward to the days ahead, we knew that nothing could shake the foundation we had built together. In that moment, I understood something profoundly simple. True strength isn't about avoiding hardship. It's about facing it, standing together, and refusing to let anyone or anything break you. And we had done exactly that. We had survived. We had thrived. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt completely, unshakably at peace.